And as for the Grand Plan East or the Generalplan Ost, well, look what's happening in Greece. Look what's happening in Spain, in Portugal. Look what's happening in other countries that have not made the news yet. It's just the beginning. So here is the master plan, the cartel's strategy to force Greece, Ireland, Spain, and the rest of Europe into bankruptcy. Well, why would they do that? Well, first of all, let's look at how they do it. They promote diseases behind the mask of providing health care. They do exactly the opposite from what their goal is. How can you cure cancer with chemotherapy when half of the chemotherapy substances are known to cause new cancer? And if you deceive entire nations with respect to the healthcare system, you are draining them economically. You're killing the people, but you also drain them economically. Entire nations. Because you force them to pay billions for imports of patented drugs. And that money, that's what causes the bankruptcy of entire nations. Not because the people in Greece, Ireland, or for that matter other European countries are lazy. It's the systematic drainage of essential funds. So now we come to the real purpose of this plan. The real purpose is the political takeover of entire continents. So by maintaining this crisis, by constantly draining this money, they actually cause the crisis. So when the crisis comes, Mr. Sarkozy can stand up there and can say, we need a transnational government for all Europe. And the same is also true for the oil business. So there are alternative energies available right now, but they're not being used. Why? Because they're being blocked in order that this scheme works in this area too, draining the national resources and make the people of Poland, and for that matter all of Europe, dependent on oil. Same purpose, same effect, bankruptcy of just about any countries that continues. And then, in order to hide that scheme, the political stakeholders of the cartel, namely Sarkozy and Merkel, embark on what I call psychological warfare against the people of Europe. Deception. They call it exactly the opposite. Defamation of people like us, of the pioneers, who say this is what's happening. And distraction, like wars in Libya and other areas. The purpose of all of that, confusion. You should not know what's left and right. It's such a crazy world. Let's just hand over all responsibility to those guys up there. That's what they want. Then they launch fear campaigns. Do you remember the influenza epidemics on the pig flu? There was nothing about it. And the goal of all of that is to cause an increasing dependency of the people of Europe and ultimately to make them accept even a dictatorial regime. You are reminded when you look at that at George Orwell's 1948, 1984. Those who read it remember the newspeak, the new language that is being created in this dictatorship. They say democracy and they mean dictatorship. They say freedom and they mean dependency. They say prosperity and they mean poverty. And they say peace they make war. And the latest strategy of the cartel is to hide behind social movements, movements of democracy, online and offline. Wikipedia. If you want to know the background of Wikipedia, look at wiki-rath.org, where Paul and others researched the background of this medium. But you can easily find out who is behind these initiatives. Because in those initiatives, in those movements, you can criticize everything except the pharmaceutical business with disease and the petrochemical dependency of the energy sector. So that, for me, is one of the compelling reasons why there has to be a movement that does exactly that, addressing those two legs on which the forces of evil depend economically. And if you look for a definition of the movement of life that we invite you to join, that's it. The time has come, historically, for a global movement that defines as its goal to end these dependencies from pharmaceutical drugs and from petrochemical energy supplies.